Most people think being smart is about reading more books, getting good grades, or memorizing facts. But that kind of intelligence is surface level. It might help you pass tests, but it won't change your life. Real intelligence, the kind that makes you dangerously smart, is about one simple choice. And once you make this choice, everything shifts. So in the next 8 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what this choice is and 4 principles that will make you sharper and more strategic than 99% of people. Let's get into it. The one choice: think for yourself. Here's the choice that changes everything. Stop letting other people think for you. Most people go through life on autopilot, absorbing opinions from social media, copying what their friends believe, and never questioning anything. They never stop to ask, is this actually true? Or am I just accepting it because everyone else does? But the moment you decide to think for yourself, to question everything, to form your own opinions based on logic instead of popularity, you become dangerous. Because most people can't do this. They're too afraid of being wrong, too worried about standing out. So let's talk about how to actually develop this skill. Here are 4 principles that will help you master it. Principle 1. Question everything, even yourself. The first step to becoming dangerously smart is learning to question everything. The news you read, the advice people give you, even your own thoughts. Most people accept information at face value. Someone says something confidently, and they believe it. But smart people ask questions. Where did this information come from? Who benefits from me believing this? What's the evidence? Let's say you see a headline that says, "Study shows that coffee is bad for you." Most people would just accept it. But a critically thinking person would dig deeper. What study? Who funded it? When you start asking these questions, you often find the headline was misleading. But here's the most important part. You also need to question yourself, your own biases, your own assumptions. This is called intellectual humility. Most people are so attached to being right that they refuse to consider they might be wrong. But smart people know that being wrong is part of growth. There's a technique that top debaters use called steel manning. Instead of attacking the weakest version of an opposing argument, you build the strongest possible version and challenge yourself to argue against that. If your belief still stands, it's solid. If it doesn't, you've just learned something. That's how you get smarter. Not by always being right, but by constantly testing your thinking. Principle 2. Learn to spot manipulation. Here's something nobody teaches you. People manipulate you constantly. Advertisers manipulate you into buying things you don't need. Politicians manipulate you into supporting policies that don't benefit you. And if you can't spot manipulation, you'll spend your life being controlled by other people's agendas. Let's talk about the most common tactics. First, emotional manipulation. Someone uses your emotions against you. They make you feel guilty, afraid, or insecure, so you'll act a certain way. Advertisements often use fear. If you don't buy this product, you'll miss out. Everyone else has it. That's manufactured urgency designed to bypass your logical brain. Then there's social proof. People convince you by saying, everyone else is doing it. Your brain is wired to follow the crowd. But in modern life, following the crowd often means making bad decisions. Another big one is authority bias. People assume that if someone has a title or degree, they must be right. But authority doesn't equal truth. Doctors can be wrong. Scientists can be biased. So instead of blindly trusting authority, evaluate the actual argument. Does it make sense? Is there evidence? Once you start recognizing these patterns, you'll notice them everywhere. And the harder it becomes for anyone to manipulate you. You're thinking critically and asking, what are they trying to get me to do? And why? Principle 3. Consume information like a strategist. Most people consume information passively. They scroll through social media and let everything wash over them without processing any of it. They're not learning. they're just being entertained. But if you want to be dangerously smart, you need to consume information strategically. First, be selective. Not all information is valuable. The average person spends hours consuming content that has zero impact on their life. Celebrity drama, outrage bait, mindless entertainment. So curate your information diet. Follow people who challenge your thinking. Read books that teach you skills. Second, engage actively. Don't just passively absorb information. Question it, take notes. Ask yourself how you can apply it. When you actively engage with information, your brain processes it more deeply. Third, cross-reference everything. If you only read one perspective, you're not informed, you're indoctrinated. So whenever you learn something new, seek out opposing views. Compare sources. Think about how investigators solve cases. They gather evidence from multiple sources, look for inconsistencies, and piece together the truth. Approach information the same way. Be a detective, not a sponge. Principle 4. Train your brain to think in systems. Here's where most people get stuck. They think linearly. Something happens, and they only see the immediate cause and effect. But dangerously smart people think in systems. They see the bigger picture. They understand how different pieces connect and how actions create ripple effects. Let me give you an example. Someone complains that they're always tired. Most people would think, I need more sleep, and leave it at that. But someone who thinks in systems would ask deeper questions. Why am I tired? Is my sleep quality poor? Is it stress? Bad diet? Too much screen time? They see that tiredness is the result of multiple interconnected factors. This applies to everything: business, relationships, health. Nothing exists in isolation. So when you're solving a problem or making a decision, don't just look at the surface. Look at the system. What are the variables? How do they interact? There's a concept in game theory called thinking several moves ahead. Chess players don't just think about their next move, they think about how their opponent will respond and how they'll respond to that. You can apply this to life. Before you make a decision, think about what happens next, and then what happens after that. Let me give you a real-world application. You're deciding whether to take a new job. Most people would just think, does it pay more? But someone who thinks in systems would ask, how will this affect my mental health? Will I have time for my goals? Will I learn valuable skills? How will this impact my relationships? They're thinking about how this one decision will ripple through their entire life. So to recap, the one choice that makes you dangerously smart is deciding to think for yourself. Question everything, including yourself. Learn to spot manipulation. Consume information strategically, and train your brain to think in systems. When you master these principles, you become someone who sees the world more clearly and thinks more strategically. And that's the kind of intelligence that actually changes your life.